Yep, we have. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. We will resume the Finance and Committee meeting for the 24th of February. And just remind you that Renee, or Councillor Dingwall's on Teams. So we're now up to item number 14, which is the Manawatu Community Athletics Track Review. And that's presented by Kathy Diva-Todd. So, Kathy, when you're ready.
Pardon me. Thank you. I'll take the report as read, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. First up is Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Kathy. I did just have one point I wanted us to consider today about this, which was, finding my notes from this morning, 3.3.3, costs of operations, the third bullet down says the user group will endeavour to seek grant funding of up to 10% of the total cost, anticipating a major renewal. I was a bit concerned about capping that at 10% and wondered what the thinking was behind that.
That is consistent with the previous memorandum of understanding. As you can appreciate, the renewal of the surface at the athletics track is a considerable expense, and when council entered into it in the beginning, rather than Massey and the council agreeing to have 50% funding each, they determined that athletics needed to have some skin in the game as well, and so therefore set their funding target at 10%, knowing that that was quite a large amount of money for them to be able to raise. So it's probably a realistic amount as well, but it's also somewhat historical.
So my concern there is saying of up to 10%. I don't disagree that 10% might be the best amount that they could fund, but I didn't want to cap that at 10%. If there was potential for external grant funding that would be in excess of 10%, why would we not want that?
I can't answer that question. I wasn't part of the negotiations. However, you do have a councillor representative on the group who may be able to better answer that question.
So, maybe. So if I wanted to change that to take out the cap, is that something we can do by recommendation through this process, or is that something that would have to go back to the Community Athletics Track group?
Yes, it would have to go back to the NCAT committee because Massey and Athletics have indicated the agreement. Massey has signed the MOU at this stage, so that would have to go back for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Kathy. Just tracking around this timing of the renewals of the surface. It looked like we built it in 2000, we renewed in 2018-19. And now, if I understand correctly, we're setting out to be able to renew by 2029, so sort of gone from an 18-year renewal term to more like a decade. Just wondering why?
A very good question. So, manufacturer's recommendation would be at 10 years. The track was very well maintained and very well looked after, and we managed to extend that period. However, we need to provide for probably what the manufacturer would say in the shortest period. It is our intention to only replace the surface when it is getting to the point that it needs replacing because it is impacting on the use of that surface, but it is likely to be longer than a 10-year period.
Right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillors, there's no further questions. Just checking. Thank you, Kathy. You may step down. Okay. Right, we will move to the recommendations. And the recommendations, number one, that Council endorse the proposed 2020 Manawatu Community Athletics Track Memorandum of Understanding is attached to the memorandum titled Manawatu Community Athletics Track Reviewed Memorandum of Understanding presented to the Finance and Audit Committee on 24th of February 2021, noting that it replaces the 2000 and 2006 Memoranda of Understanding. And item number 2, that Council approve signing of the 2020 Manawatu Community Athletics Track Memorandum of Understanding subject to funding and the 2021-31 10-year plan. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Harpeta. And I'm opening for comments, so Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have put up a proposed additional recommendation which probably will need wording amended following the officer's comments. My concern here, our process seems a bit strange if Massey have already signed it before we've signed it off, but my concern here is that we say the user group will endeavour to seek grant funding to support the total costs of renewal. That contribution to be up to 10% of the total cost. So we're capping the amount of grant funding we would go out and seek. And without any evidence or support from even our community fundraiser to show what the quantum of funding might be possible in that space. I don't think we know. What I'd like to see is just us to remove that sentence that says the contribution will be up to 10% of the total cost. I'd be very happy for us to seek grant funding to support the total costs of renewal and to see whatever comes back in for that. But I don't know why we would cap that at 10% of what will be a very large amount of money, no question. But from the officer's comments, I think I can't put that up as a recommendation here, that we'd have to propose that that goes back to seek approval from the organisation itself to do that. But maybe I could seek an officer comment on how best to achieve that end.
Stuart?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I think the intent's probably relatively easily dealt with. I don't think a resolution now necessarily helps. I think we can, looking to Aaron, I suspect we can go back to the group and just say this is an amendment we're proposing. I doubt there'd be much argument about it, and so I don't know. My advice would be, I think we could do that without a specific resolution. Yeah, as a minor amendment, we could probably go back and get the memorandum changed.
Excellent, thank you. Then I will withdraw the recommendation that I gave to the officers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, that's easily solved then. Are there any other comments, Councillors? Okay, we will move to the vote. Billy's gone. And that is carried unanimously. We will now move on to item number 15, the CET Arena Pedestrian Entrance Bridge LED display. And Bryce, you're in the hot seat now. And that's on page 425.
Yeah, afternoon, councillors. Pretty straightforward administrative matter. We were given some additional external funding for a very specific purpose, and this resolution basically gives us the ability to actually use the money we have already received. So happy to leave it there and take any questions.
Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Comfortable with what's being proposed, but just did have a question. The arena program in the earlier report said that was 1.976 million over budget. It was in the red category, over budget on schedule. So I just also thought it would be good to have an understanding. I think infrastructure meeting is still a month away. whether we're looking to deliver that program within the budget or not.
Basically it was more of a forecasting issue. So the program is still proceeding to program, and we are currently within our budget. However, when we forecasted back in July, we obviously got the money a bit slower than it actually came out the door. So everything's proceeding as planned.
So you're saying you're still expecting to deliver it within the set budget?
At this stage, we are within budget, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question. These LED screens, obviously they will be used for advertising. Are we expecting any income out of these advertisement, number one? Number two, sorry, does that give the funder automatic right to display their name and their advertisement for free?
So primarily these screens will form part of the culture and heritage storytelling element. So it'll actually, as you're walking along, you'll actually be able to see displays and read the story essentially of Arena and a whole bunch of educational stories as opposed to a direct focus on marketing.
So they're not displaying advertisements.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Bryce. Are there any further questions? No? Thank you very much, Bryce. We'll move the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Dennison, and seconded Councillor Harpeta. And I'll just read the recommendation that Council increase the budget of Program 1534 Central Energy Trust Arena Manor 2 Embankment Development by 130,000 plus GST to allow for the additional external funding received to be used for the supply and installation of the LED displays along the pedestrian entrance bridge, and the balance of 20,000 plus GST of the external funding to be used as an operational expense for the initial licensing and content of these LED displays. So is there any comments? Straightforward? Great. We will go to vote. And that is carried unanimously. We now move on to item number 16, which is on page 429, Clearview Reserve proposal to grant an easement on reserve land to Powerco, and we have Bryce again.
Another administrative matter, the transformer has been in place on Clearview Reserve since its establishment, and basically this is an exercise to be, I guess, formalising that arrangement through an easement. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Bryce. And Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bryce. As you noted, it is an administrative matter, about 17 years, 18 years overdue. So just wondered what's happened by way of process to sort of tidy this up so that we're doing these things in a more timely way.
Yeah, look, we do sort of come across these matters from time to time, obviously well before my time at council. This matter was actually driven from Powerco, who are also doing the same thing all around the country, and have actually dedicated some resource to systematically top to bottom going through New Zealand and looking to sort these issues, and they brought this one to our attention and are definitely in the driving seat, and all we are looking to do is formalise it for them.
Thanks. So I mean that gives us a sense of how the backlog's being identified and cleared in terms of a go forward. Do we have a process now that sees us and Powerco having conversations as subdivisions are planned, etc.?
Yeah, so there definitely is a lot more process in place now to be capturing these. So when the new subdivisions are formed, our development team picks up on these kind of things, and when we're creating reserves, we generally will be creating these easements and things all at the same time. So there's definitely a lot more rigour from a legal sense as well when titles are being issued to pick these matters up at the time, rather than having to retrospectively go back and do it later.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Right, no further questions. Thank you very much, Bryce. So I'm happy to move that recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Dennison. And I'll read that out. That council approves notifying the public of the proposal to grant an easement at Clearview Reserve, Palmerston North, to convey electricity to Powerco in accordance with Section 48 of the Reserves Act 1977. And number 2 is that council notes the land area affected by the easement for Powerco is described as part of Lot 1 DP 69185. The affected area of the easement is shown in the draft LTP plan contained in attachment 1 of the report titled Clearview Reserve, proposal to grant an easement on reserve land to Powerco, presented to the Finance and Audit Committee on the 24th of February 2021. So we have mover and seconder, so we will, are there any comments before we go to vote? Just checking, no, good, right, we go to vote. And that is carried unanimously. Right, item number 17, and I'm sure you've been waiting for this, Ms Suma and Jeff, so thank you for your patience. So we have the assurance report on review of Project Management Office, so that's page 441. So over to you two when you're ready.
I'm happy to take the report as read, Madam Chair, and any questions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Masuma and Jeff, for the report. Two questions. One, there's some reference in the report to the fact that we don't really have a sort of IT system that sort of yet works in this way. Is that being rectified in the draft long-term plan, or is this something else that's starting to come onto the radar?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, we have put an element, an item in our budget for trying to address providing a software solution. We aren't expecting that to be in place for another 12 to 18 months, mainly because this type of system will affect a lot of the organisation. So, yeah, there's a lot of work to do in that space.
Cool, thank you. The second one's...
excuse me, just Patrick wants to make a comment.
Just through you, Madam Chair. Common story in PNCC's technology and audit findings is that technology can play a part in the solution, and we are in a position, as you know, of having multiple demand for very constrained resources. I completely agree with the officer that it is in the long-term plan, and just restate that we have to work as an organisation together to prioritise that which we can do first, and that process is still underway.
Councillor Barrett, continue.
Yeah, thank you. The second question was really around impact assessment of projects, and I know there's some reference in the report to sort of the maturing of the project management function within the organization. Do we envisage a point in future where we'd be doing impact assessments on major projects within the context of the PMO?
Through you, Madam Chair, clarification, impact, do you mean benefits, or are we talking about a range of impacts such as social, economic?
Well, could be either, but, you know, we sign off on $10 million for, you know, a new grand thing, and quite often we get, you know, a report back that says, we just built it, we're all done, which is great, but sort of 5 or 10 years down the track, you know, did we actually have the expected changes in the community that we wanted to?
We are working on the system for benefit realisation, so we can report back to committee on completion, and then over the number of years that the benefits were expected to be realised, and come back to committee on that. So yeah, that's part of that whole software solution, so that we can get an end-to-end solution, so that we're able to come back to committee. Because at the current currently we're not able to capture the benefits and be able to report on them once the project is complete.
Great, thank you. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks very much. Look, I'm just looking at the resourcing teams 1D on page 452. There's reference there to the central planning of internal resources as led by the PMO division. I take it there's some fragmentation in terms of how that's managed internally within the City Council. So could you just comment on that, and also perhaps what might be in the future in terms of how that's going to play out? Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Currently, the audit and the function of the PMO is really infrastructure focused. And previous financial years in LTPs, that each of the businesses within infrastructure have delivered their projects. The idea here is that we are going to be doing this in a coordinated manner through infrastructure, so that all the units within the business know who's doing what. We're able to move resources around in a far more coordinated manner so that we can achieve the outcomes.
If I may, perhaps just, and so is there any kind of, is there any sort of playbook around that, how that's going to play out? Like, is that part of a program that's projected going forward?
We will be, through here, there's one of the outcomes in the audit recommendation was a complexity tool, and we'll be using that on all the programs that are coming up in the LTP with the managers within the infrastructure, so that we know the best location within the business, who does what, and which of the businesses is delivering what the PMO is delivering, and so there's far more clarity for the delivery of the programs.
Mr. Armstrong.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My first question was around where does post-project review sit within the PMO, and I think, Councillor Barrett, you've noted realisation or benefit realisation, but there's more to that. It's about, in my mind, learning from mistakes, sharing those learnings. So where does that sit in terms of responsibility, frequency?
Through you, Madam Chair. In the project close segment of what we're looking at rolling out in our manual is a project close report, and that captures benefits, captures lessons learned, and those are going to be held within the PMO, and we've got a PMO hub that we're setting up on the intranet so that we can share those lessons learned.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question I had was just around the review process. So I'm assuming that this is a report which has been worked through with management, there's been feedback on the recommendations, and this is something that the assurance reviewer and the management team are now in agreement on.
Yes, we have gone through that process.
Okay. Were there any major points of contention or disagreement, Ms. Una?
I wouldn't say there were any significant points that we disagreed on.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks for the report. I just wonder where to from here. So there are a large number of recommendations, and they've got fairly short time frames for resolving. So will we get a further report back that these things have been achieved, or how do we follow up from the recommendations that are in your report?
So these recommendations will form part of my accountability report that comes through to you guys every 6 months, so you can maintain oversight through those reports.
And are the timeframes considered realistic by the PMO office?
Thank
Or
you, Madam
maybe
Chair.
I should say achievable, might be a better word.
As you'll see, we've got at the back of the report, there is a work program and there are dates noted, but they're also noted beside them how far through we are already on those. So a number of those items that are due in March are actually 100% complete. There are some things now that we have a new CIO that we want to run past her before we progress, such as the manual, etc., etc. But yeah, we're pretty confident that we'll meet most of those March numbers of the things we want to do.
Cool. Thank you.
Just to follow on from the post-project review process, Jeff, previously with the old audit review committee, we used to have all projects over $1 million, there would be a post-project review come to the audit committee. And this doesn't seem to be in place now, so will this become part of the process? Are you aware of this process?
No, I wasn't aware of the process, and we're happy to accommodate the committee if that's, the committee deems that as something that they want to see.
Yes, it's always been something, and it was moved in council many, many moons ago that this was always part of audit, that we would do it, and it was always on projects over $1 million, so I don't think it's necessary for me to move a motion on that because it's always been part of council. It was a directive from council. And if that can't be found, I'm happy to move it, but I don't think it's necessary. Well, I'm sure you'll find it. Councillor Denison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two queries I had. One was on page 450 of the order paper, page 7 of 17 in your report. In the top section, it's got setup of governance enabling decision making. In the fourth bullet point down, it's got good representation from across the organisation was noted on the PRB, other than representation from strategy and planning. And I just thought that seemed, was it intentional that they were left off, or is that? And what's the reasons, and has that been rectified? Or should it be? Why is that noted?
I don't think it's intentional. It was just something that when I was present and was at one of those meetings just to observe, I noted that maybe that could add value. Having someone that's been involved in the strategies and the plans and we're involved in planting the seed essentially, they can help connect the dots at times when we are maybe losing focus of what we're trying to achieve.
So has that had feedback from the leadership team that that's possible? Maybe I should direct that in other directions through you, Chair.
I haven't heard any hesitation, and I think it is underway around who would be most suitable to join that governance board.
Okay, that's cool, thank you. And the other thing that we used to get highlighted in an annual comment from external audit was around, or at least maybe the internal audit, when I think back, the project execution plans, and not all of them were timely. And a little bit like the Chair was querying about the project summary reports coming through for reporting. The project execution plans, are they still part of our process before we, on those larger projects, before we execute them?
We're expecting that all our projects and programs have project plans, irrespective of the size now, or the value, for want of a better word. Now, we are putting together a standard project plan, but we're also doing a project plan light for projects that are, you know, not over the $250,000 mark, for example. So our expectation, and that's what we're delivering through the PMO, is all projects have project plans.
We'd get, in past years, we'd get to this stage of the year and out of the annual plan there'd be some outstanding project execution plans that hadn't even been written up, and that was what was getting highlighted. Are you confident, or can you state that every plan that we had in this year's budget has a project execution plan? I can confirm that not every project in this year's budget has a project execution plan. Yeah, so that's, I guess, something to flag and to work through the audit process somehow to find out why that is and how that can be rectified, because
But anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm on page 455, and I'm just interested in the comment on element managed change, control, scope, time, budget and quality. Through discussions, it was noted that everyone had different opinions on how change should be managed. I'm just interested in that comment, if you could expand on that.
So I think when I was doing these interviews, many had agreed that the processes that we have in place at the moment and that they are going through are sufficient, but then there were also some that of course thought that no, we need more structure, we need more discipline in this area, or even more guidance or education into what is good change control management. And that's, I guess, where I have noted that there was a different understanding of what good looks like in this case.
So will a standard practice be put in place for change control?
I believe there is one that is being developed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions? There are no questions, so thank you. You may step down. Right. I'm happy to move the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Naylor, seconder. And the resolution that the memorandum titled Assurance Report on Review of Project Management Office and its attachment presented to the Finance and Audit Committee on 24th of February 2021 be received for information. I'm just like to comment that I'm pleased to see this report, and the project office I think was formed about 18 months ago, so I think this is timely that we start looking at processes, and I know that all the processes aren't where we would want them to be, but I'm pleased that we are making a very good progress into getting this office sorted and our project management finally sorted out, especially going forward where we've got a lot of these, millions of dollars worth of projects, and to make sure that we've got our processes and work processes in place. So I am pleased. And I'm pleased that the management team have taken the recommendations on board, so I'll be looking forward to seeing the update report on the recommendations. Councillor Barrett, do you want to comment?
Just briefly, excellent progress, excellent report, really pleased. But I do think we're at a really important stage here, and just picking up on the comments from staff and the general manager around moving on the IT side of this. I can relate that in an organization that I also spend some time in that specializes in bureaucracy and projects, we established a project management office about 3 years ago and had a lot of momentum until the wrong IT solution was brought in and pretty much kneecapped the thing. I'm sure it won't happen here, but I just do want to wish staff the best in finding an enabling IT solution around this, because there are some disasters on the market.
Right, well, on that note, there's no further comments. We will go to vote. And that is carried unanimously. And we've got to the final item, number 18, our work schedule. So are there any questions regarding the work schedule? I'll take it as read. I'm happy to move the work schedule. Councillor Naylor will second. So any comments? We will go to vote. And that is carried unanimously. So I am more than happy to close the finance meeting for February. Thank you, everybody.